Well, if I become a punching bag, I'm a punching bag. But I am very happy to testify before any congressional oversight committee. I have nothing to hide. I can explain and validate everything that I've done. So, it's going to be inconvenient if they actually are out there essentially threatening to make my life miserable. But I'm going to do what I need to do, and that is cooperate fully because we have nothing to hide at all.
We have such a short cultural memory, and because of that, we repeat mistakes that we should not repeat, really. Think of the COVID-19 fiasco, utter shambles, utter fiasco, as Anthony Fauci is being grilled by Senate committee hearings in America, where he's pleading the Fifth Amendment. He will not incriminate himself by giving testimony to the Senate. This is a man who was given preemptive pardon by Joe Biden. As Joe Biden left office in 2024, he said, no one should prosecute Anthony Fauci. Now, why would you give somebody such sweeping immunity? Not even saying he's immune from prosecution for this crime and that crime, just a blanket immunity. So if Anthony Fauci shot someone in the face, he's free. If Anthony Fauci committed heinous crime, he's free from prosecution. That should have set alarm bells off already. If you were a pro-vaccine person, if you were a pro-lockdown person, if you were a pro-masking person, if you were a pro-social distancing person. But then we realized that all these things, like we suspected at the time, were just manufactured. They were just ways of controlling people. And Anthony Fauci is culpable of so many crimes. COVID shenanigans aside, he's culpable for so many crimes. And these crimes are not just isolated to America. What America did, the rest of the world copied. What America did, the rest of the world was like, that's something to follow. Obviously, China set a more draconian standard. But Anthony Fauci wasn't just influencing America. He was actually influencing the whole world. He literally said to argue against him was to argue against science. He made himself science. Meanwhile, science actually said, you can't rush out vaccines within months. How would you tell the side effect profile of a vaccine if you haven't had the time to test and to make a note of all the side effects that people report? But no, Fauci was moving at the speed of science. And I know for sure that some of my listeners in this channel have been affected by the vaccine. They are disabled because of the vaccine, which in some instances was forced upon us. I declined. I wasn't working in the NHS, but there was a point at which Sajid Javid was going to force the vaccine on all NHS workers until there was a revolt by people, because a third of NHS workers did not want that protein in them. Care workers were fired, and there was no apology from the government except from Danny Kruger. And you know what happened after care workers were fired by Boris Johnson? He imported care workers. So that's a slap in the face. It's like, first of all, you get fired from your work. Second of all, we import hordes of millions of people to replace 40,000 workers. 40,000 workers, care workers were fired. British care workers were fired because they would not take the vaccine, and they were replaced by millions of foreigners because of Boris Johnson. So these are not small minutiae that we're talking about. These are world-changing, country-changing decisions that were made because of the COVID hysteria, thanks to Anthony Fauci, thanks to Boris Johnson, who had no clue what was going on just because he apparently barely survived COVID. everyone in this country had to suffer. And for another, the number of deaths from COVID were nothing compared to the number of deaths from heart disease, cancer. If the running total of deaths is displayed on a screen, that will cause mass hysteria. If you were to display the number of people dying daily from cancer, it wouldn't cause mass hysteria, obviously, because cancer is not contagious. If you were to put up the number of deaths of the people dying daily from heart disease, it wouldn't cause panic because heart disease is not contagious. But take this to the bank. You can look it up in the official statistics. The number of people that died because of COVID. Because of COVID. Minuscule. Not people that died with COVID. Not people that had a motorcycle accident and because when they swabbed their noses, there was COVID in their bloodstream. It was, oh, COVID. That's a COVID death. Yes, these statistics were manufactured like that. The number of people that died from COVID, minuscule. This was a nothing disease. This was a nothing disease, but was made to be more than what it actually was, thanks to Anthony Fauci. And like I said, I know that there are people in my listenership who have been disabled by not COVID, but by the vaccine. Vaccine that was rushed out, vaccine that was not tested, vaccine that actually killed more people than died of COVID. More people died from the vaccines than died of COVID. And I don't even know if this video will be released on YouTube, because at the time I was trying to scream from the rooftop. From the limited knowledge that I know from immunology and studying vaccines as an undergraduate, saying this is all wrong. This is being done all wrong. But YouTube said, who are you? You're not an expert. You're just a physiotherapist. Experts from the United Nations, Anthony Fauci, Boris Johnson, all these people have declared that these vaccines are safe and effective. These vaccines will actually stop the spread of the disease. They will halt the transmission. And the truth is, they actually potentiated transmission. If you took the vaccine, you became 200 times more contagious. Did you hear that from any of media? Any of the mainstream media? No. Everyone was on board. Everyone was bored. Everyone was enchanted by Fauci. Fauci was getting his friends were giving him all kinds of praise. He was friends with Barbara Streisand and was treating her rash or her warts. Who knows what she suffers from, and Anthony Fauci was treating, as we discovered from his diary entries. All this to say, we have such short cultural memory. We are easily distracted and move on to the next thing rather than dealing with very, very serious things. During COVID, I was called a vaccine denier. I was called a science denier. I was called a granny killer. I was called a numpty. Many, many other things. And if I had been white, I probably would have been called a racist while I was at it. And I truly hope that as a culture we can do much better. I hope that as a culture we can do far better than how we've acquitted ourselves over the past few years. Whatever the outcome of the Senate hearings, I know that there is a special place in hell reserved for Anthony Fauci next to Mengele, the Nazi doctor who experimented on me, Fauci, go to hell. Go to hell.
I'll echo Senator Johnson's comments about your opening statement, Mr. Chairman. I think it was dead on. Very, very well done. Mr. Fauci, do you know who David Schertler is?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. What does the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution say?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
No, I'm just asking you what it says.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I'm going to give the Constitution to my aide. He'll bring it over to you so you can have it for future reference. I think it's something that every American should know what the Constitution says. Do you know who wrote the Fifth Amendment?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Can you do me a favor in the audience and stand up if during the time of the COVID pandemic you were called a racist for calling the virus a Wuhan virus or the China virus? If you thought the 6-foot rule was total crap, if you thought the vaccine wasn't something that you should take, if you thought it was outrageous the way the mask policy was rolled out, if you were fired from your job for not taking that vaccine, including members of the military, if you thought closing schools was catastrophically stupid, and that you thought that during these times saying these things made you somehow a lesser human being. Dr. Fauci, can you just turn around and look at the people behind you? You're not willing to do that? That's not a question. It's not a question. To your lawyers, not a question. It's a request. All you have to do is look up from your lawyers and look at the people who were absolutely shamed for saying what we know now to be the truth. You can't even look at them? That's a question. Are you able to look at them? You can sit down in the audience. There was a mom in Ohio during the depth of the coronavirus pandemic, decided to go to her high school football game for her son. They hadn't been out much. The kids had been learning at school, and then the school got shut down. They hadn't really gotten much out of that education. As any parent knew, that remote learning was no learning at all. But it was a Friday night. Her son wanted to go watch a buddy go play football. So they went to the stadium. They sat alone, far from everybody else, just a mom, a dad, a few kids. They didn't feel they needed to wear masks because it was stupid, because they were outside. They all live together. They're not near anybody. Dr. Fauci, do you know what happened to that mom and that family? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
They were dragged out of that stadium and arrested. Those policies were put in place because you had moronic politicians that listened to the words of a megalomaniac who was more interested in having met a Kardashian than the suffering of the American people, and that is you. Your advice to communities like that, to idiotic politicians who enforce those rules, arrested that mom for watching a football game with her own family outside. When that story broke, I said to myself, I cannot stand idly on the side and watch this happen. It was about 6 years ago today that I decided I'm going to give up my businesses, sell them all, run for office, run for the United States Senate. Here I am sitting in front of you 6 years later saying, who the fuck do you think you were for doing that? It is a total disgrace what you did to this country. And if my Democrat colleagues are standing there defending you, I hope the voters of the United States of America watch the clips of every one of you doting on a guy who was more interested in being a celebrity than saving American people. I will make it my mission to make certain that every single one of those Democrats who did that will see that clip over and over and over again. Because there is no defense of what you did. You may have had a 50-plus year legacy of public service, but it ends in total and complete disgrace. So let me ask you an opportunity to answer one question. Will you apologize, just apologize, to the people who you harmed through your actions? Will you say, do you have the dignity to just say you're sorry?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
So you won't